stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Yep. Haithman. Hughesby.
Yes.
Hirsch.
Yes.
Kissinger Wolf.
Yes.
Long.
Here.
Scuball.
Yes.
Swente.
Yes.
Baloo.
Yes.
Zimmerman.
Yes. Okay, we have a quorum. Adoption of the agenda, to entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
I so move.
Second.
Second, Swente.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as presented. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Public comment. Any public comment this evening?
Staff recognition.
I would like to congratulate all the fall teams on a
I
great
got
fall
the wrong
season.
word.
They did a tremendous job. All the co-activities did. There's a real good chance that we could get our first girls swimming state champion this weekend. She's got all the potential to do it. I don't want to jinx her, and I hope she gets it. If I can write about it in the history. Keith Hansen did a great job, first year head volleyball coach, taking them to the sectional finals. One game away from state, did a great job. Football had a little bit of bad luck, injuries, set them aside. And I congratulate the One Act play for making it to state for 7 years in a row.
Yes.
I wish them all the best this coming, next week it is, I believe, I got the date there, so.
Okay.
I congratulate all of those.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? I jumped out of order here, I guess. Next item was staff recognition. The board would like to recognize Lori Tracy, our district math specialist, for volunteering to provide training to math tutors working for our local kinship program. Lori trained 5 new after-school tutors so they felt more confident helping their students in math. Kinship recently received an AT&T Foundation grant allowing them to add extra homework support for middle school and high school students. They used the grant to hire tutors and transport students to Kinship after school every Monday. As part of equipping the tutors to assist students, Lori provided information on promoting a growth mindset regarding math, gave an overview of the middle school and high school math curriculum, and provided several resources to use to support the tutors and for tutors to use directly with students. Lori also showed the tutors how they can view the required work assigned by each teacher. Lori did this on her own time after school at the Kinship House. As a district, we appreciate her sharing her expertise with an organization trying to partner with our families in the school for the benefit of Tomahawk schools. Thank you, Lori. And as a former president of the Kinship group and math teacher, I really do appreciate that myself, Lori. So if you'd come forward, please. Thank you, Lori. Nice job. Okay. Consent agenda. Consent agenda.
Deep breath.
Yeah. Anybody got, never mind, but that's it. Approve the minutes from the regular meeting, October 11th, 2022. Approve the minutes from the closed session, October 11th, 2022. Approve the minutes from the special meeting on October 25th. And approve the minutes from the Personnel Committee meeting on November 2nd, 2022. E, approve the minutes from the closed session on November 2nd. And F, approve the invoices from October 8th to November 4th. So I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda and the donations, I'm sorry. Above pay and donations, thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda items as presented. I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items as presented. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay. Item 9, approve the revisions to the following policies. Kay or anyone,
We're out
Dan?
of order here.
I'm out of order again?
Staff reports.
Don't have to.
He wants this done and over with.
Is this a time, you got 15-minute limit today?
I'm not the one you wanna be
Right.
pushing
I'm just
tonight.
asking. I need to know if 15 minutes is all we need tonight.
No, okay. I'm gonna use this.
There you go.
Okay,
Actually,
staff reports.
Before we
thank
go
you.
on to staff reports,
Yeah.
I want to look in the lion's mouth here. I just want to make sure we gave adequate opportunities for public comment. I know that Bob spoke, I know that Bill, why don't you say anything for public comment? Just
I didn't
kind of-
think so, but was there any other public comment?
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, staff reports. Guy, you gonna go first?
Yeah, I'm first. For the elementary, I did attach the strategic plan again, our November newsletter, and then a little thing that I believe was on Channel 12 with Paula Norman showing the reader's walk. And then we have been quite busy at the elementary level. You can see that we have work under most of the pillars. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but we've been doing a lot of work at the elementary level. Does anybody have questions on any of the pillars that I have listed there? Or any of the work that we've been doing?
Nope.
Without question, it's been busy at the elementary level.
It was a great newsletter though, Guy. Yeah, I really enjoy those newsletters.
Annette is taken over as part of her job, and that's Snowden Cole, and I think she's doing a really nice job with the
Yeah,
newsletters.
I agree.
Really jazzing it up, she's doing a nice job with it.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a question, Guy, on the win time. It says 45 minutes has been added to each grade level schedule. What has, I mean, 45 minutes, that's a lot of time, so what went?
Well, we hope that not much went. I mean, we have asked teachers to look at their schedules, because when you start getting into that addition, they may have had to look at recess times and how much is, and try to just become more efficient with their schedules. It's something we're gonna be aware of as we plan for next year into our scheduling, that, things aren't gonna work around what's best for adults, like even with the toddler and a lunch program and schedules. It's gonna have to be that our schedule is what's best for kids is driving what we do.
Okay.
So, it's something that we had them look at their schedules. I don't know that recess was impacted, but we've said, recess is important. It's important to get the kids out in the fresh air, but yet, sometimes we've asked them to take a look at some of those 15-minute chunks of recess, because we know that 15 minutes in the elementary is not really 15 minutes. By the time kids get jackets and clothes on, some of the kids don't even really make it outside. They basically make it maybe down to the doors, turn around, come back. So we're trying to become more efficient with the schedules. It's something, we added that time, and, I guess it's something we're just gonna be more aware of moving forward and what that time really means.
So not only is the 45 minutes in the classroom for the win time, the teachers all have to meet outside of that time, correct? To
Well,
decide
there's
whether-
some groupings that have happened, and on this, we're gonna be looking at regrouping with some of our data at I think it's November 18th. So we had that initial meeting, and then we look at what's best for kids, what the kids need. So as they grouped, it's not like they're continually having those meetings and grouping, but I think there is a lot of discussion that comes with win time on what makes the most sense for the kids. And as we get more comfortable with the win time, there's probably gonna be a lot more flexibility with moving kids to what they really need. So those discussions are gonna happen. We have the meeting time set aside for it, but I think that as this process moves forward, there's gonna be a lot more discussions about the kids and what they need.
When is the meeting time?
They have their once a week. Right now, we have a day set up within November 18th, like I said, but I just think that the teachers are gonna find that time within, maybe it's in their common planning time, maybe it's in passing. I know there's discussions that happen in the hallway, but I think it's causing those discussions to be centered around what the kids need.
I'm just concerned, because it's time, always
precious
common
thing.
planning time and another, their prep time is being taken up for this stuff, so.
Well, you know, the common, we expect them to meet once a week with their common planning time. I do think that there's some discussions that have just happened in passing, but time is precious at the elementary level.
Any other questions? Okay, middle school?
Okay. All right, excuse me, I'm choking on myself. Sorry. All right, I have a couple things I wanted to highlight on my board report. As you can see, middle school has been very, very busy as well. The first part in the teaching and relevance pillar, we are bringing in, and I put this link in there for you guys to be able to see it too. It's called Engineering Tomorrow. And it's basically access for students to have free virtual labs for engineering activities. And I saw this actually in a different school, different middle school. And I know the two people that are facilitating this, they're two retired teachers and a principal from WASA. Lisa Peck, who was a former teacher at Horace Mann, and her husband Brad Peck, who was the principal at WASA East for a long time. They're facilitating this and bringing these labs to different schools around our area. And when I had approached our 8th grade science instructor and talked to Ms. Hughesby about bringing this in, we are gonna start with the water treatment lab, and we're gonna do that in December. And the whole thing is free, it's all set up, all the planning is done. They have different activities, and it's basically all planned out for you, and it's a way to kind of, you know, again, pique students' interest in engineering and different types of activities. So we're gonna start with 8th grade in this water treatment lab and then see where it goes from there. But I've heard really great things about this program, and I know the two people that are facilitating it are awesome. So we're gonna wait and see how that goes in December, but I think that's a really cool opportunity for our kids. In our whole student pillar, you can see that we're gonna be, we've been doing a bunch of stuff with our PBIS team, but we're gonna be doing a quarter celebration, end of the quarter celebration activity on the afternoon of November 18th, and we're gonna have a students versus staff basketball game and lightning contest, and then Shirley Derleth, who is part of our PBIS team, has also organized a community service project along with that for our students. So right now, we are doing a penny war to raise money for the community Thanksgiving dinner and a food drive that will also be geared towards that, and we have a representative coming over from the community dinner to actually receive all of that stuff at halftime of the game. So that'll be a really cool opportunity for our kids to have some fun, but also give back to the community as well. We are also gonna be planning our winter breakout activities coming soon, because you know, once November hits, things start rolling by pretty quick. You get through Thanksgiving and then you're into Christmas, and time flies when you're having fun. So we're gonna be planning all of that as well. The next thing I wanna point out is this Friday, again, we will be having and hosting our annual Veterans Day Assembly, 10:30 in the auditorium. And then as part of this, our student council did an ice cream fundraiser last week for the Never Forgotten Honor Flight. And thank you to the Windmill, they donated all the ice cream and the cones. And our student council raised over $550, and then student council chipped in, so we're able to give a check to the Never Forgotten Honor Flight for $650. So we're really excited for that too. So if you're around, please come. It's hopefully gonna be a great program. And the last thing I'll just want to point out is we have parent-teacher conferences coming up on Thursday, and we tried, which I think is going to be really good for our parents, for our in-person conferences on Thursday. We utilize Sign Up Genius, so parents could sign up, and they had a link ahead of time to schedule out their time, so that they weren't standing and waiting, and their time is valuable too. So a lot of parents took advantage of, if they were gonna see, you know, 4 different teachers, they could schedule that, you know, in succinct order so that they could just hop from one to the next. So right now, I checked the signups, and our 6th and 7th grade are completely full. 8th grade is getting there, so, but then the open times that are there, if parents wanna pop in, they can. So I'm hoping that's gonna be a really useful tool for both parents and for our staff. And the cool thing about that program is that you can set it up so that it sends parents a reminder automatically a day before of when their time slot is. So hopefully that'll work out very well as well. So that's all I want to highlight for you. I can answer any questions that you have.
Any questions? I guess I just had a couple things. Looking at the engineering tomorrow section that you got, have you the teachers or anyone thought about maybe asking any engineers in the community to come in and talk?
Yes, so we're doing the water treatment lab, and we're gonna try to see if we can get someone to come in. There's other ones, like the ones that I was telling you about that I saw in a school down in Wausau, they had engineers from Green Hack coming in. They were doing a bridge building lab. So as we try this out and as it grows, that's exactly what we wanna do, is partner with some of our local engineers to have them come in. And I know down in Wausau, when they did it, the engineers from Green Hack actually came in to be guest judges for the day when they presented their bridge building activity.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, because I'm thinking specifically of the water treatment lab. The mill has a wastewater treatment system that's pretty big, and the two individuals that are charged, that Christy Newman and I can't think of her first name, it's a Tyler, that have responsibilities for the environmental issues.
Yep.
Very good speakers. I think they'd be good with kids too. That's a couple people that, if they're interested,
Yep.
to contact about the wastewater treatment system. Maybe some kids could even get a tour of that facility
Yeah,
out
and
there.
I know that Dawn is all over that.
Okay,
So she's gonna kind of see if we can get someone to come in with that too. Yep.
good, thank you.
Even the city water treatment
Yeah,
plant. I mean, I had to do that for a project when I was working on my master's and going down and seeing that, and it's like, oh, lift stations and all that? It's interesting how the whole
And
system
the best thing
works.
about this stuff, it's all free. Like, you can sign up for any one of these, and they coordinate everything, and it's all free. So hopefully it goes well, and we can continue to grow it.
okay, thank you. Anyone else? Thank you. Ryan?
Some of the items in the board report might be covered by directors, so I'm gonna leave some of them alone for them. The one thing I did wanna point out is the very last bullet point that you see on the high school board report, dealing with one of the processes we've been creating that addresses 3 different pillars. And that is the creation of what we're gonna be calling Hatchet Pride Wednesdays. So, through the academic and career planning lens, we have this plan grades 6 through 12. And one of the things that we really saw was, through the referendum process previously when we lost a counselor, was part of that plan was really we were finding it difficult to execute. And so one of the things that we had planned was our grade level activities for the high school, that once a month we would have strategic things that we were gonna be doing based on grade level and what needs typically are for students in that grade level in the academic and career planning process. So what we've been looking at doing was, we felt like now was a great time to start creating that blocking out that time frame to be creating those activities to be doing as whole grade levels. So one of the things that we've done is, we've blocked out this time once a month to have those activities that'll be designed and created by a team that we're putting together right now. Another thing that we're gonna be using that block of time for deals more with the whole student or whole child, dealing with Hatchet Pride and wellness. And so that's another block of time that we can be using for our different Hatchet Pride specific activities, whether it be behavioral boosters, celebrations, things like that. And then the third part that was in our strategic plan was finding more time for staff collaboration. And so we have department collaboration that occurs every other week during our resource hour time, but our teacher leadership structure didn't have any time planned during the school day to have our regularly scheduled meetings. We've been meeting at 7 a.m. Minimum of once a month. Often it's more than that to execute the different action items that we have associated with our building. So we were kind of looking at this multi-use block of time during resource hour that we could be doing all these different things. But it's guaranteed once a month we'll have that. And so we'll really be looking at the needs of the school, the student, things in our whole child pillar, like I said, academic and career planning, executing plans through our building leadership structure. And we just felt like now was the time to start taking that first step. And the first step was carving out time, figuring out how we were gonna be arranging our students, blocking them with teachers, and that logistical piece of making that happen. And we're gonna be trying it next week for the first time. So next week is gonna be a little bit of a trial on our logistics to see if everything worked out, getting students to the correct places. creating an opportunity for a little bit of relationship building between that teacher and those students, because some of them have never met each other before, just because they might be a teacher that possibly teaches more upper level students, and they might be in a freshman oriented or freshman group, and giving them a chance to build relationships and know those kids a little bit more. And then working a little bit of a Hatchet Pride activity that they're planning right now, the Hatchet Pride team. And then December, we'll do Hatchet Pride, a little bit of a booster in that. And then January, we're looking to be our first academic career planning activities by grade level. So it gives us a little bit of time for that. So that was kind of the first, dip a toe, then, get in up to your knees, and then, jump in full stream. But it's a lot of logistics right now, getting people to the right places and accounting for all the students with different types of needs, and then we'll really start working on the content of what'll be, covered in those different months. The other part, just to revisit again, the building leadership team in the high school has been fantastic for many years. And that's a group that is really committed and dedicated to the initiatives that are going on in the building. And, I just want to say, that particular group, they're not paid extra. They're doing it because they believe in what the building is trying to do and what we have as goals for our students and our staff. And so this was one of those things where they're all very busy people outside of the classroom as well, with advising activities and coaching and that whole gamut. And they're doing things before school and after school. So this was one of those opportunities for us to create that sacred time for us to have that guaranteed time for discussions that then leads into those, subcommittee, I'll say, work of that group that they'd be doing outside of this regular monthly meeting. So that was really important where we had staff collaboration for other purposes, but one of the most important groups in our building, the leadership team, didn't have that yet. So that's kind of that all-encompassing type of move for us to move that direction. So questions about anything?
Any questions for Brian? Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brian. Teresa?
I'm going to focus on pillar number 4, and through that you'll see a lot of work is being done. Continuing to meet with the new teachers has been very exciting, getting in their rooms, talking with all teachers around their student learning objectives, what students they're targeting to monitor growth, and trying new things with to make sure that they are seeing the growth they're intending to see has been really fun, having those conversations with staff all across the board. And then looking at their professional growth plan, what that is going to look like has also been fun. Some have asked for resources and time, and those are the conversations I love to engage in. We had a wonderfully successful time in Antigo. I heard a lot of great feedback from staff around the opportunity to network with peers that teach similar subjects, and they could have used more time doing that, but we also broke out into learning sessions throughout the day and brought back a lot of ideas that I personally hope to share with staff when I get to share at staff meetings over the next couple of months. So it's just been a fun time to kind of get the first few months behind us and really look ahead at what our objectives are for student learning throughout the year and how we're going to attack that. We also had an opportunity to plan with CISA, a co-planning, co-serving PD for our math and ELA departments, and math met this month. It was a good day. Middle school took half of the day, and high school took the other half of the day. Very good discussions, and it was just cool to see those two departments who want to work together more have time to work together. And this was a foundation setting for what that co-serving model will look like, and we hope to start planning more and seeing more of that effect. In fact, Wendy and I had a wonderful meeting today between math and special ed, and they all were complimenting each other about how the students were growing under both of their services, and we're like, yeah, that's what we want to see more of. So really great to see our workforce in action, and it's been exciting for me to be back and have those conversations with them. Any questions at all? I know I touched on a little bit of the report.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Wendy?
I'm not going to read you the whole report, it's long, there's a few things we got going, but just one of the things I wanted to talk about is, like Teresa said, we've been working on the co-teaching, co-planning, and one of the things that we're really looking at is our ELA data and how our students are making progress towards those goals for their students with disabilities. Angie McPherson has been helping case managers learn how to look at the data and measure progress based on each kid's identified goals, so what area they're working on, so that we're demonstrating so we know what we're doing is making a difference and demonstrating that progress monitoring. So she's continuing to work with them, and we're all learning a lot about that process and her expertise, another way that we can collaborate. We're already starting to look at case loads and numbers for next year, because open enrollment numbers are due in January, so we start looking at where we're at, where we're planning and going, how many kids are graduating, who's moving up from 5th grade, 8th grade, so that we're balancing those caseloads. You can see our overall special ed numbers went down just a tiny bit this year, but we did have 22 kids with IEPs move in and 8 move out. That's about a caseload, but our case managers have really handled that well, balancing those additions. I thought you were asking a question. I was asking something. So we just start looking at that already, and it shows you also, I just added some numbers so you know what kind of meetings that looks like, how many meetings we've had just so far this school year. So quite a few going on. So some of those kids will qualify, some won't. It just depends upon where they're at. As far as whole child, we've been looking at our nursing through COVID. We had higher nursing needs for contract tracing, individual needs, family preferences, kids coming and going, and we had added through COVID funds and ESSER money at that time an additional nurse, and we've seen that service delivery model change because of that and how we're meeting student needs. So we've done a lot of work with other districts, looking at how other districts are meeting the needs of students with similar populations, smaller schools, bigger schools, to see what adjustments that we can make to meet the many needs of students with rising health needs and just the individualized attention that they need, and then also make it feasible for one nurse to do that. So there was from the state an additional grant, not super huge, it's a 1-year grant, but we're looking at using that money to provide some additional training for office staff and paraprofessionals, and we're looking at getting some CNA training so that if they are able to, or have students that have higher needs, or the nurse needs assistance, then we have other staff that's trained that we can provide some additional support to train in those situations. So it just gives us a little more flexibility, and it takes a little bit of the strain off the many duties that keep adding on to people, and it's just, there's a lot of needs with increased diabetics, seizure plans, there's a lot of different situations that come up depending on who moves in, who moves out, and what kids are experiencing, so just helping her monitor that. So that's where we're going with that. Our counselors have been working with CISA and looking at mental health framework, behavior pathways to help create, in tandem with what Teresa and I have been working on with CISA 9, our multi-level systems of supports, so that teachers can have clear resources, interventions, pathways, so they can look at a visual and be like, okay, where do I get help with this? What is the process? What is the procedure? Just because we have them in place, but just aligning that and making sure it's accessible to teachers, so when they need help, they know where to go to get it. We just completed our social emotional screener, so looking at internal concerns, external concerns, conduct concerns. At the elementary, we do the Best Universal Screener through 4K through 5, and then middle school and high school, 6-12, does the SAVERS, where students do a self-screening, and then teachers also screen it, and then we use that data to look at our universal supports on how teachers, what might be a high need in a certain grade level or a classroom, and then our behavioral specialists and our counselors and our PBIS teams look at that data to see what resources we need to direct towards our teachers and students. I've also been working with CISA 9 on a task force. A very common trend in special education in Wisconsin and all over the place in the country is that that physicians medically diagnose disabilities and disorders versus educational criteria for reading disabilities. So we're working together to help collaborate with the medical community to understand what those differences are, to support parents to understand the difference too, because you'll get families and doctors that don't understand the process, or we don't understand what they're looking for, and they'll send a prescription to school and say the kid needs that, and that's not what IDA law says that we have to follow. They have to meet a certain criteria. So you may have a medical diagnosis, but they don't meet educational criteria, or they can meet educational criteria and not qualify for a medical diagnosis. So I did attach the link in the board agenda if you want to check that out as well.
Yeah.
That's probably probably enough for me for now. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
The best screener, is that
Yes.
every child gets screened or?
Every child,
And who does the screening?
the classroom teachers do. When we first started out doing it, this is our third year doing it, we had 2 screeners, so we tried to do, like a special setting and a classroom setting. So maybe a kid struggles in music class but does really well in the classroom, or vice versa. But we found it was a little bit too cumbersome to have every kid screened by 2 person. It just got to be a lot on the staff. So we reduced it to just having 1 screener. So they just do, the classroom teachers do their class list, and it's twice a year. And
When do they do that? When do they do the screening?
there's a 2-week window. One is in the fall, one is in the spring. So it was from October 24th to November 7th, and then again, we're doing it in February.
But I mean, like, in the classroom as they're teaching, they pull kids or?
No, it's just a questionnaire, it's a survey.
Okay.
It's a survey that, it takes 3 to 5 minutes for each child.
But like 4K, 5K,
Or-
it's still, like, is it like the educator effectiveness survey where it's a smile, that kind of thing?
No, the kids don't complete it, the teachers do.
Oh,
It's only the staff.
just
complete
during
it.
their time?
Yeah,
They
for
don't need
4K.
to ask the kids any questions or
No.
anything? Okay.
No, for 4K through, sorry, I misunderstood what you're asking.
Yeah.
4K through 5, the teachers give a summary of how they see the student, how they interact and react to certain situations, how they exhibit different behaviors. And I can send you a list. There's a link to it. That you can do a walkthrough where you can see what it looks like and what those questions would look like. So I will make a note and I will send you that link. Anybody else?
Sure.
Yeah, I do have another question
Yes.
as a follow-up to that. So, generally speaking, surveys and screeners are very subjective.
Mhm.
So what's the step after that, that determines whether or not a child needs additional services?
So we look down, so for example, the best screener that will give red, yellow, or green. So if there is like a cautionary or a student looks like they're struggling based on what a teacher has observed, then the classroom teacher and the counselor and our behavior specialist and the principal may sit down and look at, okay, where is this child struggling? And it gives different data points. It might be where they like shrink from a certain situation.
So
I'm not finding the right word. It'll give like they're boisterous or they're reluctant. And so then for each one of those, it will also give a suggestion on here's a strategy that you can try in your classroom, step by step, to help that not only that student, but that might meet the needs of all of your students.
You answered actually my in your first sentence or two.
Okay.
So you're then involving both a counselor and the principal, or the counselor and yourself, or, so that it's not just the teacher and one other person, but there's multiple sets of eyes on it at this point.
Correct. And then we have our behavior person, they'll go through and they'll look at a grade level or a classroom and say, these are like your top 5 behaviors, not like Dave's doing this and Doug's doing this. It'll be like, we've noticed that it'll give a classroom health, and then it'll identify top interventions that are universals, that gives the teachers steps that they can implement that benefit all kids.
Sorry, go ahead, Shark.
Nope, I'm good, I
Does
know
the-
how screeners and,
Okay.
screeners and surveys
Yeah.
can be very, very subjective.
Are the,
And I just wanna
are the
make sure
parents
that-
involved at all?
There's not a parent screen, we send a letter home prior to the screening notifying parents that it's happening so that they can notify us if they would like their child not to participate.
Okay,
So they have the right to refuse if
Yes,
they.
and that's fine. We just,
Okay.
and we have a couple families that opt out, and some opt in, some opt out, and that is, we get the data that we can, and it still gives good information based on our building and our classroom health. So we notify parents a week or 2 ahead of time when we're doing that, and it goes out through our Skyward or a paper letter in the newsletter, so that we let people know that it's coming up.
okay. Any other questions?
Now that, perhaps this is for you, Wendell, rather than Wendy, but now that we have an idea of the number of students that fall into this category, do we have any idea yet how the state is looking at funding? Last year we took out of the general fund $1.2 million because the state was short in funding students in this category. Do we have any idea yet how that's playing out in the district budget?
It's a bigger talking point than it has been in the past, and I'm sure as the biennial budget gets developed over the next several months, that's gonna be an area that's gonna be targeted. That was already, there was some funding that was released and especially with ESSER in regards to how ESSER is used to target some of that, so, but I'm sure that's gonna be a bigger topic. I don't really have any indication on where the budget's gonna go right now, other than that is one of the top pieces that they're looking at, so.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay.
I've got a couple of things here. I just wanted to mention one thing because this will be coming the board's way soon. Anybody who has a school issue device or logs into the school's network, Dina's been working to put in place or in our case, two-factor authentication, which is a cybersecurity strategy or method that ultimately, rather than just putting a login or putting a password in, you also use another method before it lets you access your account. So to try to prevent and protect our network a little bit better, he's rolled this out with staff for the most part. There's a couple of different methods that we can use or choose to use. Some of you might already be using like a Microsoft Authenticator app or a Google Authenticator app, and you can put this on all of your private stuff as well. So it's worked pretty well so far in rolling this out. It's initially going to admin staff, office staff. It'll work its way into our staff as a whole as we move forward, and then possibly Dean's kind of monitoring what it looks like if it gets rolled out to students. But one of the biggest threats that we have to the network as a whole is through email and through other methods of people accessing our network and then being able to access other accounts. So this is another measure that will be put in place. It's preemptive because we do have cybersecurity insurance right now, and each year they are putting in place more and more stipulations as they learn more on how we need to protect ourselves so that they don't have a huge claim. So these are gonna be things that are gonna be required as we move down the road. So it's really proactive right now, and making sure that we're not, up against the wall in a short time frame to roll something out. So that's been going well, right, Dean? And he'll be reaching out to those of you that have those devices and helping you set that up as well and showing you how it works. Anything you want to add to that, Dean?
No, not really.
Okay. He told me what to say and I said it. I'm not gonna lie. The other thing I wanted to mention and just build on what Teresa was saying, so the common PD that CISA 9 facilitated, for us it was in Antigo, it was Antigo, Elko, Tomahawk, and Mosinee. They also held two other ones, one in Rhinelander and one at Northland Pines. What ended up being for them is the largest professional development opportunity in the state for teachers. They reached over 1,800 teachers through these different common PD sessions. And also the hope is as they build and learn more about how this went and get more feedback, they can figure out how to establish and build better networking sessions between all of our staffs at different different departments. So I know Teresa mentioned that it was nice for our teachers in certain areas to be able to collaborate with other people in other districts that teach the same subjects. So that's going to be the goal of their networking as they move forward. So this is something that I know they're interested in continuing. Obviously, it's hard to find districts that have the same days in their calendar where they can host these things. So that was a logistical challenge for them, to say the least, and they did a really nice job managing that and figuring out where they could host these sessions and pull it all together. So they had a very nice keynote speaker, and there's some discussion already on what they're going to do to build on what they learned this year. So I'm looking forward to that. But definitely want to commend the entire CISA 9 staff for the work that they did in pulling that all together. They did 3 of those, I might add, in 1 month as well. So that was pretty much clear calendars and make sure that you can pull these off. So it was all hands on deck, and they did a very nice job. So that was all I had to add.
Okay. Anyone else? Anything? Okay, if I'm on board right now, Now it's the quarterly finance report.
Yes. So you have this attached to the agenda. So we, as you remember, went to a quarterly instead of a monthly finance report. It worked with Sandy to, my role in this, again, it was mainly to work with her and try to figure out a structure that we thought hit all the points that the board would want and that community members would want to be able to see, and to break it down so that it's a little easier to apply to how our money's being spent, where our money's at, and where we are in the course of a year in relation to past years and so forth. So we pulled together these points, and then Sandy worked to basically plug a lot of our specific information, and we broke it into three main parts. The first part is revenues, and then it goes into our expenditures up through quarter one. And then on the back page, if you continue through, is our cash and investment situation. So I just have a couple things that I go through and highlight for you. In the revenue section, you'll see under Fund 10, the general fund, at the first quarter, we're actually slightly ahead in revenues compared to where we were, or slightly behind, I'm sorry. But it really the same. And that number, when you look at those, there's not specific dates or times. Quarter one, money could come in the beginning of quarter two. So really over time, you'll see we're right on pace with where we need to be. There was some of the bigger ticket revenue items are listed there and bulleted for you. Some of those things we've highlighted in the past too. Fund 21, if you move forward, you'll see, anytime you see this, and the questions do come up when we do our voucher list too each month, but anytime you see 21, you'll see either a 10, a 21, a 27, or an 80 that starts out that category, that number. The 21, when you see that, is always money that's fundraised through our clubs, athletic teams, classes in some cases, but it's all privately, or I shouldn't say privately, but it's just fundraised through those efforts, and then it gets placed in Fund 21. But those are not actually district or taxpayer dollars as they come in. So you can see here we had revenues over quarter one of $60,266.89. So to go to show you the efforts that our staff and leaders in these clubs and coaches and so forth put into fundraising is pretty significant.
Where does admission to different activities go? What fund does that go into?
I think it just goes into general, to be honest with you.
General,
Yeah.
okay, so
Yeah, and it offsets the costs of officials and
Workers
other
and-
expenses, yeah, for that. But I think that gets placed right into
Okay.
10.
Guy, that Fund 21 then is if, when funds are needed for a particular activity, are they separated out? So this activity contributed 5% of the 60,000, or they draw off the whole 60? Could one activity take the whole 60?
Well, they're limited, they could, I guess. They're limited in the number of fundraisers that they,
No, not,
am I missing the gist of that?
not to raise the fund, but to draw off the fund.
No, it's specific. Within that, they each have their own.
They each have line items.
Okay.
Yep.
So no
And that
one-
changed, that used to be I think in the 70s,
Okay,
and that changed recently within the last year or two, that they put them all in the 20 fund.
okay.
Then you see Fund 27 there. Fund 40, just one thing to highlight in Fund 40, so if you remember, we transferred $900,000 from, into our Fund 46 a year or so ago, to be dedicated to capital projects. That money, since it's been there, we have not used any of it as of yet, and that money has gained interest in the amount of $4,085.86. So there is some revenue being generated just off of where Sandy has our money placed. And you'll see on the back page, we'll get to this in a minute, but on the back page, she places the bulk of our funds in the local government investment pool, which gives us a higher interest rate. Now that's fluctuated a little bit. I think in August it was somewhere in like 1.55. It ended the quarter at 2.42, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So, there was a significant amount of money that we made just off the money that we have on hand. Food service, you can see, received a grant there, which allows will allow them to have and serve a hot breakfast each and every morning. And the last line there, basically our total revenues for the first quarter are just a little bit higher than where they were last year at that time. Going into the expenditure side of things, again, there's breaks it down a little further. We did put the graph in there and some information. Going back to our 21 fund, just want to highlight, so we did raise over $60,000, but the expenditures in quarter one coming from that fund were around $67,368.10. So they are allowed to carry a balance in their fundraised money from year to year. So it's not that we have a deficit in that fund, it's just that they spent, overall, a little more was spent than what was actually raised this year to this point. And again, that's subject to change as we go throughout the year. The 40 capital funds, a couple lines down. So we had no activity as far as expenditures go in quarter one with that, but a lot of that's due to, well, there's two main issues. One, we're using Arlen's budget first before we tap into that Fund 46 that we set aside. Bigger projects would come out of Fund 46. The problem is right now with supply chain issues, we don't have the work being done. We don't have the materials on hand, so we're not being billed for those things as of yet. So there are some things as we go through the year that we'll tap into that. It just has not happened yet. All in all, looking at the bottom, well, I will say one thing about Fund 80. You see a couple of things in there. We get billed quarterly for our portion of our school resource officer's salary. That will be coming in the next quarter, but it would be for the first quarter expenditure. So that number will change as we get into the second quarter as well. All in all, we're a little lower in total expenditures than we were a year ago. So that's, that's a positive thing as well. But again, that number will change. And on the back page, the very last thing, you can see basically the cash on hand, or the amount of money, not cash on hand, but the money that we have in our local bank in terms of savings, and then as well as what's put in the local government investment pool.
Okay. Any questions?
No, I like this format. This is a nice format.
I just wanted to comment on that too. I think it's a very nice format. It's easy to find out where things are going, how they're coming in, highlighted. We don't need all the details, but highlighted. It makes it much easier to understand expenses and income and where it's going, where it comes from. So I assume we owe Sandy.
She's listening.
Okay.
So
thanks,
Sandy.
Please relay that to her if you would, from the board. Okay. Any other comments about the quarterly finance report? Okay. Now, for the revisions for the following policies, we have a number of them there. Kay or anyone, any comment on any particular ones or in general?
The policy, Deb and Ann and I met. We reviewed the policies. There were 15 policies that you have before you. There's basically 10 different versions because a couple of them are duplicate between professional and then the support staff that you'll see there. It's the same verbiage, but they're just in different sections. A lot of them are the technical changes that need to go on or updates that we received from Neola. There is one question that Shar has in here before we, we'll get into that, but are there any questions on anything specific? These are all governed by Neola. We came up with some things. We had a couple that we sent out to staff, other members, just to review, and we've got a few more to review that we're going to finish up this batch tomorrow. That's about the gist of it.
So on policy 2522, which is related to the media centers, in regard to reconsideration of materials, the line of the new wording says, decisions on reconsidered materials will stand for 10 years before new requests for reconsideration of those items will be entertained. And I highly disagree with that long of a time span. Our kids are in school for 12 years. 12 years. And we are stating in a policy that if we evaluate something and make a decision, that decision stands for 10 of those 12 years. And I can't support that long of a time. Your board will change, your administrators will change, your librarians may change. Just think of the changes in advancements, technology, everything that occurred in the last 10 years. I think that's way too long of a time. So I understand that that's a time-consuming process. However, my personal opinion, again, that's just way too long of a period of time. So
There was no set, when we were reviewing the policies, there was no set time frame. We picked that off as a sample of another one. I did research, and there's a couple other schools out there that have 5 years. So we could make that change.
Yeah, that changed.
and I know that I had emailed both Wendell and Kay ahead of time. And Wendell, you had reached out to Neola.
I just forwarded the
Yeah.
email tonight.
Okay.
Yeah. I did the research, he did Neola.
Okay, yeah,
Otherwise I can.
Yeah,
that's
go ahead and
my
jump in
honest
and
opinion.
I get it
don't think
tonight.
that should be in there. That's a long time.
And we could,
The response I got back from Chris, I did forward it to Wendell, is, districts have gone with 3 or 5 years, most have done 3. And that's all he said.
Oh, yeah, there it is, yeah.
Any other comments on that?
I have a problem with that,
Which one?
with changing it to
Yep.
3 or 5.
3 or 5?
Yeah, I agree. I think that you're right, board members change. Everything's gonna be changed in 10 years, it's a long span.
We won't even have libraries.
Are you proposing 3
I
or
would
5?
I would say 3 is acceptable, 2 or 3 to me is acceptable. Most of us have 3-year terms,
Right.
so if we wanna go with 3, I'm more comfortable with that. I recognize that it takes time to do this and that it's time consuming, and it takes a lot of effort, from our staff. Yeah, I guess, I
3 okay?
I could live with 3.
Okay, I'm fine with 3.
Everyone okay with 3?
Yeah?
Okay,
And where is that?
we'll make that change then. Any other comments on the policies?
Do you need a motion for that?
Well, we'll
Because
do
we
it
haven't
with
approved it.
we'll approve it with the change. Okay, any other comments on the policies? Okay, then I would entertain a motion to approve the policies as presented, with the exception in policy 2522, change the time period from 10 years to 3 years.
I so move.
I'll second.
Okay, a motion is second to approve the policies as presented with the change noted. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
I'd just like to say that we'll have the policy meeting tomorrow, and then we'll get those policies forwarded to you so you can review them for the next meeting. So we can finish up that batch before the January batch comes in. So,
Okay. Okay, very good. Okay, then speech and language structure presentation.
So we have Cody Lewison and Kate Todge, our 2 speech and language pathologists here with us tonight. To go over with the board and present them what the whole process from beginning to end of speech language looks like. So thank you for coming and joining us.
Well, thanks for having us. This is what we're presenting on speech and language in the district, starting with referrals, evaluation, and then through service delivery. And we'll go ahead and just get started right with referrals.
So we receive our referrals for speech language services from a variety of school-based and community sources. We find them through child find screenings, classroom teachers, birth to 3 transitions, so that's the kiddos that are turning 3 and coming to us, parents, and then child care providers. Once we receive a referral and then the parent grants us consent, we can do the initial evaluation. Our assessment measures are dictated by whatever concerns were talked about in the referral. So we look at a variety of areas of speech language pathologists, including vocabulary, social communication, syntax, articulation, fluency, voice, in addition to some others there. The protocols that we use are standardized assessments, where we get a standard score, criterion reference assessments, which are more like a developmental scale, observations that we conduct, parent and or teacher rating scales that we send out, and then informal assessments like language samples, intelligibility ratings, and narrative refills. The time it takes for us to evaluate a kiddo is really, really variable from student to student. It is based on which area we're assessing, how many assessments we're actually delivering, and then just the student's compliance and stamina for those testing.
So eligibility for speech and language impairment is based on criteria determined by DPI. So DPI provides those checklists. Those criteria include nationally normed standardized assessments, so that gives you a standard score, research-based norms for things like intelligibility, requirements for stimulability for sound production, and the presence of adverse impact on educational performance, social, emotional, or vocational development. So to be found eligible for a speech and language impairment, a student must meet all criteria outlined in that area of concern. So a student, this is an example of this is the DPI criteria for speech or language impairment. Depending on the area that is being assessed for that student, they may be being assessed only in the area of language or only in the area of sound production for articulation, voice fluency. We have to look at all of the criteria set forth by DPI, and the student has to demonstrate a need or deficit in all of those areas. If they demonstrate deficit in one area but not the other two, they're not eligible. So the requirement from DPI is all areas must be met in any area that is being considered in order to be found eligible for a speech and language impairment. Speech and language services can also be delivered to students as a related service who are identified in another impairment area, such as autism, OHI, which is other health impairment, or significant developmental delay. And that would be if a student has communication need secondary to that disability that impacts their access to special education, then we would provide services to decrease that adverse impact and to allow them to have access through increased communication skills. The design, duration, or frequency of speech and language therapy is written in the IEP is based on a variety of things, including the area of impairment, the severity of the student's need, a student's endurance or compliance for stamina for participation in therapy, and the academic environment that they're in. So in order to consistently provide quality direct and indirect services, the Tomahawk School District utilizes a 3-1 service delivery model. The 3-1 service delivery model is a workload approach which allows 3 weeks of direct service for students and 1 week of indirect services and student supports. So indirect services can include pull-out services individually or in a group, push-in services individually or in a group, or speech therapy that's embedded into your programming, for example, early childhood, the life skills program, or other specially designed programs that we offer in Tomahawk School District for our students with special needs. Indirect services could include observations as warranted to determine carryover or generalization of skills, collaborations with classroom teachers, special education teachers, and paraprofessionals, some training with paraprofessionals on using communication devices, programming those AAC devices, so speech output, where a student may be able to use a device that will speak for them, preparing and creating those visuals that students are using for communication that may just be paper-based or something like that, and then also the provision of home-based materials and working with parents, so if they want and are interested in providing some supports at home to carry over those goals, they have access to that too.
And our student support services are the services that aren't necessarily written into an IEP, but they kind of apply to the whole of our caseloads, which include Medicaid billing, writing progress notes and IEPs, scoring and analyzing the assessments that we deliver, scheduling the IEP and the eval meetings with the team members, including families, doing the child find screenings, writing the lessons, constructing therapy materials, and then mentoring of our team members in special ed. So they will continue to receive their speech and language services with us until it's time for a reeval. So you get a reeval in special ed every 3 years, which is a DPI requirement. Or if they have met all their goals, we can initiate a reeval to say they're doing great, and let's see kind of where they're at. Or if a parent requests, we can do a reevaluation. At the time of the reeval, if they no longer meet the eligibility criteria that was on that initial checklist from DPI, then they are dismissed from speech and language services and they are done with us.
That's a lot of information. But if you have any questions about what we presented.
Yeah, I think you answered a couple of them. As I looked at this, I was thinking about at least 2 of the things that you presented. One is how do they get into the program? How do they get out of the program? But then, what would you think as a guesstimate would be the average length of time that a student is in a speech and language program? I mean, is it a semester, a year, 2 years? I know it varies.
It is incredibly variable. I mean, we have students that are in as little as, 6 months, and they've met all their articulation goals, and they're on their way. And we have kiddos that start with us as 3-year-olds and are still, seeing us as 5th and 6th graders. So it just totally depends on their area of need and what we're addressing. For the speech language only kids that are only receiving speech and language, we're not a related service, it's typically a shorter amount of time, in the absence of anything kind of neurogenic, right? We have some kiddos, it's rare, but that have more of a neurogenic component to their speech, and those kids are much longer lasting in our services than a kiddo who is just missing their TH sound. That typically would take, a year, maybe less. So it is highly variable.
Okay, then you said that, I didn't quite see it all, and that's okay. In order to get into the program, they have to meet the 3 different requirements of DPI?
Well, it depends which area they're being assessed in. So like language has 3 different areas they have to be eligible in. Speech articulation, I think it's 4. Voice, I think, is only 2. So it's dependent upon the area of need.
Okay, so if they were, needed assistance and was only in 1, where do they go?
So they're not found eligible, and part of if you find a student not eligible for services, there is part of our paperwork that says recommendations for general education. So you can provide recommendations for cueing that classroom teachers can provide, recommendations for parents, for things that they can do at home. It really kind of depends on where the need is, but if they're not found eligible, most of the time, the reason is that there isn't an impact, that we're not seeing that impact on academics or social or vocational development. That piece sometimes, there may be a delay, but not enough of a delay. And this kind of speaks a little bit to what Wendy talked about earlier. There's a big difference in qualifying for services in the school versus qualifying for services like in a medical facility, so.
Okay.
And that's the same for all areas of disability, from federal IDEA law, and then DPI has, there's model forms that you go from, and there's criteria, and it's either, the box is either yes or no, and if there's 2 questions that you ask when a student's evaluated. Do they meet criteria for special education, and then do they need special education to benefit from and access regular education?
Okay.
So they have to have both of those met in order to receive special education.
Okay, then you said that it's a 3-to-1 program where 3 weeks, I think you said, is direct contact with, I assume, you 2 ladies. And then what happens the other week?
That was that whole indirect service.
Can you go back to that?
Sure.
Screen, please.
You're gonna test my tech skills.
Yep, you did,
Nope.
you were right there. Nope.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep, so a variety of things can happen during that week. These indirect services that can be written into an IEP, as well as other student support services, happen that week. So observations in classrooms could happen, collaboration with teachers could happen, providing, programming devices and those types of things, billing, IEPs. A lot of evaluations are done during that week, like the assessing of new kids who have been referred, happen during that week.
So all these things.
I just have a question, okay? So, and previous experience with ELL, okay? So I've done different assessments, right? But what I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, is you are in the classroom and available to work with students 3 weeks, and then you have a full 40 weeks, or 40 hours to do all of your paperwork. Does that sum up? I know that sounds cold, and I don't mean it to sound cold, but is that a fair assessment?
I would say no, because
Okay.
the paperwork is being done constantly because it's based on the timelines and when the meetings are scheduled. So we're not able to push all of our meetings to be like the Friday of the indirect week, so we have all that time to get the paperwork done.
Okay, so then my next question is, as somebody who also has 25 years of background working with children, okay, from 6 weeks all the way up to 12 years of age, I know consistency is important. So if we are pulling ourselves away from them 1 week every month, okay, that to me is inconsistent. So I would like to understand why this model is better than a different model.
So there are 2 points I'd like to make. One is we do keep data on all of our kids on a daily basis. The kiddos that show that they regress because they've missed a week, they don't operate in the same model. So those kiddos are seen on a 4-week model. So those kids' IEPs are written differently
Okay.
than other
That's
kids.
fair.
The second thing is, the model of not doing 3-1, the way it works is every time we need to do a child find screening, do an assessment, do a classroom observation, anything, you now cancel your therapy sessions in order to get those other pieces of your job completed. So by doing that, we had a much less consistent.
So are you kind of staggered as staff as far as this week off? And I'm probably
Well, no,
not using
because
the
we
right
don't-
word, I apologize for that.
Well, no, because we
So-
don't see the same kiddos.
Okay.
So I have a separate caseload from her, so we don't necessarily have to stagger because the kiddos are completely separate groups of kids. So.
So not everybody's on a 3-1?
Correct, correct.
What would you say the percentage is?
It's pretty small, who's not on a 3-1, but it's any kiddo that we've shown through our data shows regression by missing us. So for the most part, those are our more severe kiddos. So kiddos with neurogenic apraxia, kiddos with Down syndrome, those type of kiddos would not be seen under this model.
Okay. And what other models are available?
What we learned at the PD day in Anago was that some of the other schools are using like a workload approach where they just figure out how many minutes they do over in a week, and then they're kind of capping out so that they don't take necessarily a full week off, but they're taking pieces, if that makes sense. The other models that I've worked in as a professional have been a version of the 3-1, but you take off 1 day a week instead of having 5 days. But the only way that program worked was that all of the special ed staff operated in that same model. So you could do all of your IEPs, you could do all of your evaluations on Wednesdays because your psychs and your social workers and your OTs and PTs and SPED teachers all had that day to collaborate. Now, that doesn't work here.
And often in a model like that, IEP minutes would be written in a monthly way because many students are still missing service because you have to stagger who you see in order to allow for that 1 day a week to do these things.
I'm not trying
So
to challenge your decision,
No,
I'm just
no,
trying
that's
to
just for
understand
that.
it because
Absolutely.
as I'm reading through this, and I kind of had the same day as you did. So if I'm coming across racially, I apologize. But I keep seeing the word could,
Yes.
right? Which, you know, then again, being someone with a very diverse background, I look at that and say, okay, if I was a regular classroom teacher, I have to fit everything into my work week. I don't have the privilege of saying, no, I'm only gonna do this, you know, for 3 weeks, and then do this. Okay, so, you know, feedback that I've heard as a board member from the community, right, and others, I have to ask those questions, because I have to understand why we're choosing this model so that I can speak to it, right? Because why are we doing this model for this group, but we're not, you know, we don't have, and other teachers don't have that, right? And they carry just as heavy a workload. So, you know, that's why I'm asking those questions. I'm not trying to challenge, and not trying, it's not my decision to make. I'm trying to understand so that, you know, I can direct them in the right manner.
So to address that a little bit, so 1 day a month during the indirect week, we have our child find screening. So that can take up to 1 of the days. They have the Medicaid billing that they do on top of it. So they also do the direct services, and there may be like some students like, so for example, like a 4K student might be identified, it's their first time they have an IEP. They qualified for services and they're learning those skills in a one-on-one session. They may have a significant disability where their intelligibility is affected, so they might be seen all 4 weeks. So again, it goes back to those individual IEPs. So then, but there might be a 4th grade student, like they talked about, when they start to meet criteria and the staff or the parents or the teachers notice they're meeting their goals, then that's when they push in and observe in classrooms as they get older, and it's not that one-on-one separate setting, it's when they're incorporating it into the regular ed setting, and then they observe in that setting and they push in, you know, on those days to see that type of behavior, to see if they're ready to be released. Some other things that they do as well, so the assessments, you know, can take, up to, you know, some assessments might take a half hour to complete, some, if they do like an ADOS, which is an autism language test, that could take up to 5 hours, and you have to have 2 people administer it. So rather than canceling on the 3 weeks, they schedule those for the off weeks so that they don't have to, randomly, because you talked about the consistency, so it's not like the second Tuesday, they're canceling Jimmy's speech. The teachers and the student know that it's always during that week, so they don't cancel those services other times, because then it's hit or miss. You know, it's honestly easier probably just to do the 4-week solid, services, and then just cancel kids when, you know, you have the billing or you have to have a child find appointment. But to create that consistency, and the ASHA, which is the National Speech Organization, you know, this is considered best practice, and that's part of why we looked at it, because it goes to caseload and workload, and how you're focusing those and developing that consistency, so that it's not like, oh, Mrs. Boulder, sorry, I can't make it today at 10. No, that kid's used to that, it throws them off with consistency and schedule. They know that in direct week, that those types of assessments and meetings, we try to schedule on those weeks.
But those children that definitely need it because of concerns of regression are still getting those.
Still get it on that coordinator.
That's important to me.
So what it prevents, instead of randomly canceling here and there to meet all the things that are legally required as part of those evaluations in our child plan and all these other things, it prevents us from canceling random spots and doing it condensed.
Sorry if
No.
sorry if I overtook that one, but.
I guess, is this a K through 12 program?
Speech, yes, actually early childhood, so 3-year-olds all the way up through transition through 21.
Okay,
Service through speech
okay.
and language.
I've heard this, I don't know if it's accurate or not, you gotta help me. That, and I've calmed down a lot, by the way.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Must be those cough drops.
yeah, these cough drops. That we have a higher number of people in speech and language than other districts, maybe our same size. Is that accurate? If it is, why do you think that is? Why do we see, what's going on in the water or what?
Well, the water treatment plant will take care of
Yeah.
Students or number?
Now we know.
Students.
So basically, like when they showed that criteria checklist before, you either, when you give those standardized assessments, that they're not subjective, it's they either meet the criteria or they don't. So it's who lives, you know, it's who lives here and what.
And I mean, is it,
issues they have.
you don't see anything behind it that's why we've got a higher number than maybe somebody else? I don't know.
When I lived in Anago, we always said it was because all the potato farms and the pesticides, so I don't know what we have here, but
Oh, boy.
Okay.
And that's
you never know.
probably information we could get for you, Ron. I don't know if our speech and language only impairment number is higher. It's not a very high percentage of our caseload. We actually just looked at it, and only about 1/3 of our students are speech and language only, and the other 2/3 are service on other impairments. So
Okay.
someone who has a specific or significant developmental delay or autism, and we are seeing significantly more kids with autism. So that absolutely is going to drive caseload numbers up in students receiving speech and language services,
Okay.
and not just our district, but every district, because that number continues to rise.
Sure.
And that, if you look at like the report, like I stated in my report, we've had 8 initial, so that's the first time they've been evaluations this year. So there's 8 referred so far, and 7 of those included speech, so that means that we're looking at multiple disabilities, and speech is only one aspect of that.
Okay. Okay.
And is that,
Anyone else? Ann?
the spectrum, you know, the autism spectrum has expanded greatly. So I mean, that has something to do with the numbers too.
Okay,
They've changed
And
that whole
COVID has not helped
classification.
us either.
really?
Yeah, we attended a training last spring that talked a lot about how the youngers that have really had no exposure because of COVID, that their language systems are now depressed. A lot of screen time, a lot of being at home and not having a lot of interaction. And we're seeing that as they come into our 3-year-old program and even our 4K programs.
Mm.
That's definitely affecting our numbers too.
Because you don't have that auditory model.
And I don't think it's just COVID, I think it's that this age, we're starting to get the 5-year-olds in who have always been on technology. And your parents are handing them phones and tablets at such a young age. That's their model for
We're not,
speech.
right, and we're not just seeing it in language numbers, I think classroom teachers are seeing it. And,
Yes.
I mean, obviously what's happening.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that too, Ann, is to,
The question I have, how long have you been doing the 3-to-1?
I think we just looked at it well, it was fully implemented by the end, yes, this will be the 6th full year.
Okay.
I guess.
So to kind of help Char with her questions, when you implement something, you want to know if it's working. So what have you done to research that? Is there anything that you've done to look back and say, hey, this is a really good service model for our students, or maybe we need to do something different?
We track progress towards their goals and the success and like how many kids are meeting their goals over time, and that's individualized because, you know, what the students' needs are and how much services and how long it takes them, like goes to the question, like how long is it, I think some Ron might ask, how long are they in speech and language? It depends upon the severity of their disability, it could be.
But do you have anything that you've studied and that you show, oh, these children are really
Yes, their
doing
progress,
well?
their progress.
But I mean,
towards
to have you, in a writing, like a document, that somebody could look at that and say, oh, this is
Yeah.
Or their
working.
individual IEPs and their
Over,
progress.
I think what
towards
she's asking is over the course of time, if we look back to, and I'm just gonna pick a number, I'm gonna say 2010, just because it's a round number, right? How many kids were in those services in that period of time? Or how many were released from it during that period of time? And then the trend that goes
Well,
along with that. And I
That's a good question,
recognize-
it's a good question to ask, but say you had 100 kids qualify for speech.
Mhm.
Maybe 20 of them qualified for language, maybe 15 for RTIC, some could be a TH, some could be, so it really depends on the individual population and what they qualified under, so it's hard to give you a finite number.
But we should
because
be
it
able
is
to follow them
individual.
along the way, along
Right.
their path.
We can follow individual students, but
Right.
like a general number,
I understand
yeah.
that. We still should have some way to follow their progress as they go from this grade to this grade to this grade, to see if we are meeting.
Correct,
Their
we do
needs.
have individual, but you can't compare like somebody that is missing their S sound to their R sound. So we track the individual data that we have on each student to see if they're making progress towards their goal, because if they're not making progress, then we have to reconvene and come up with a different plan. But because each kid's why it's an individual education plan, so I'm not sure how to explain that better, but it's kind of depends upon what that individual kid's need are, because you could have 5 kids that have this, and it might take them 6 months with an easier impediment that they get done, where these kids, it's a more complex need, and they might be in speech and language for.
But you still have a number of, the total number of kids that were in that program back in 2010 compared to today.
So I think what you would wanna look at though
See what
is
I'm
the,
saying? Is
yeah,
the
but I
trend. I
think
wanna
the
know the
total
trend.
number wouldn't be your best indicator, because the total number is going to be based on, I mean, DPI criteria has changed significantly, which is making it much more difficult for students to get into services.
That's the point.
Students are being, so when students are exited from services, I guess what I think would be a better way of knowing if it's working or not is looking at data from the past and seeing how long students stayed in services versus how long they're staying in services now. Are students in services much longer now because we have a week where we're doing these, providing indirect services and student supports? Or are we seeing that students are still exiting speech in the same time frame or sooner? I think that would probably give us a better indicator by looking for that data. I don't have it right now.
Sure.
But if it's.
And we
But
would have-
overall, I mean, we can definitely attest to that, in general, kids are getting out of speech in a much faster way.
And I think what we're saying is there a way that you can, without investing 70, 80 hours into that, because we know you're busy, but I think it's valuable data that helps us as a board say,
This model's working
model
for
is
us,
working.
for our
and
students.
it's-
I think sometimes you need to look a little deeper than that too. A lot of times with educational data, you're looking at what's normed nationally, what's normed in our state, and we do that across the board. And when you defer to, what was the organization that you mentioned? Yeah, so this is a recommended model obviously by them. They probably also have some of that data already available that shows why they recommend this model as being, you know, a good source. So just looking at any individual local data might not give us the exact answers we want.
And we would have to break that down, like which ones have language disorders, which ones have art tics, and then you could compare the length of time, like, so.
And
these
like when
kids that
they
are
started and where they started, because if they moved to us as a third grader and came in with an IEP versus if they started with us as a 3-year-old, I mean, all of that would skew, you know, because
There's
that's
so many
Right,
variables.
it's like, these are so individualized is what I'm getting at.
I
It's
understand.
really
You can never
hard to
compare
give
apples
you
to
a-
apples.
But we're just looking at trying to feel that the system we're using is the best interest for our kids. It's something to evaluate, and I know it's complex.
Yeah.
But the more you break it down, the more you help an old guy like me understand it.
Absolutely.
As long as there's no names,
Correct.
no names.
You've got the other factor that goes in there too, because I would say this, I've been on the board long enough, when I worked maternity and OB and that, you're gonna have a handful of kids coming in 5 years because of the babies that are going through with drug withdrawals. And taking care of that, that's been on a major increase over the years, and it's gonna affect the schools too.
Well, and it's also in
amazing.
the numbers of students that they're working with, and the quality of your speech language staff matters too, and we've got some really quality therapists here, and we should be really proud of the work they do with kids, and that makes a difference as well, going into, you know, I've been in this for a long time, and I've seen some really good SLPs in multiple districts, and I've seen some not so good ones, and we're lucky.
Okay.
All I'm gonna say is just do your best to keep us informed of the
I
progress,
know
that's
it's
all.
not easy.
That's all I ask.
Another question or two and then we'll move
I have one
on.
more question. On your indirect services, it says observations as warranted, and when I went on ASHA, I read that indirect week, the student support week, that the document that services are still being provided during that week. So can you speak to that?
That's
The
the
services
indirect
are-
services
yeah.
are still being provided, so not the direct service.
No,
That's what that is
But
saying.
student support week in the classroom, it says, and you have that it's as warranted, but it does say that a piece of that is that you're supposed to be in the classroom observing 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it takes to see that that child is using what you worked 3 weeks on with them.
So I'm gonna
That's what
explain
it
it to you the
says.
same way I explained it to Wendell. So if I have a kiddo sitting next to me in the hallway one-on-one and he cannot make an F stop, no matter, we're working at it, but we're not there yet. I'm not gonna do an observation on that kiddo to go spend 10 minutes to go, oh yeah, he sure doesn't do it in conversation either, because if he can't do it here with one-on-one direct instruction and a visual and a verbal cue, he's obviously not generalizing it yet. So when we say as warranted, we're looking for generalization. So if I have a kiddo with me in the hallway one-on-one and he's really starting to use it or self-correct, that's when I'm gonna go in the classroom and go, oh, it turns out in a 10-minute observation, 60% of the time, his F was right. And that's great, that's good for me to know, because then we're gonna address how we're looking at it and therapy a little differently. So it's not to observe every kid. It's
So
to
how many
observe.
kids do you do, like on an indirect week?
It's completely variable based on where they are
So
on their
it's-
goals. So, and then that's, I mean, there's gonna be indirect weeks where I need to see 16 kids in their classrooms based on what they've done for the last 3 weeks. And then there's indirect weeks that I'm gonna need to see 4.
So you do that, you do go into the
Yes,
classroom on
absolutely.
the indirect
Yep,
weeks.
That's what we're
But
looking for.
not every classroom and not for every student.
How long have you been doing that?
We've been doing observations since we started the 3-1 model.
Oh,
But in general, you're gonna see it much more in older grades, because that's when the kiddos are meeting their goals for generalization. You're not gonna see it in 4K, you're not gonna see it in kindergarten. Even first grade is hit or miss, because typically by the end of first grade, beginning of second, that's where our kids are really starting to carry over without needing a direct support.
And I think you'll see observations happen more often too with students who are new, like new to the district or new to speech and language services. Just because getting to know them in small increments of time is not the same as being able to see them in the classroom or in gym class or in music class. Gym is a great place to observe kids, by the way.
But the new criteria from the state too for initial evals and re-evals is an observation is required of all of those kiddos so that we can look at the educational impact. So every eval is getting an observation done as well.
Okay, well, thank you.
thank you.
And I guess, Wendy, I guess maybe as you report out, maybe you could include some of those numbers that we're talking about, or how you could, how we're measuring success in the program, in the 3-1 program that we've talked about here. You know,
Well, I can't, well, it's, again, it's individual.
I understand it's individual.
Yeah, it's individualized IEP, and I can,
well, I mean, okay, let's just take a portion of it and say, okay, we got 6 kids in can't say they're Rs or Ss or whatever, okay, how are they progressing? Is that, and we started with 6 and now we got 4, it's whatever. I don't know, if there's some, just think about it, if there's some way we can,
I'll
we can
work
get
with
that
Wendell to see
information.
it. I'll work with Wendell to see.
Yeah.
See what we can do, I
Whatever-
think that'd be helpful.
That's, yeah. Do that, it's gotta be something that's gonna be meaningful.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Okay, board referrals, anything? I think, Bob, you made the comments in public session. Okay, next item is to go into closed session. So I'd entertain a motion to go into closed session.
I so move.
Second.
A motion, a second to go into closed session. Roll call, please.
Screwball,
Yes.
Swinty,
Yes.
Baloo,
Yes.
Zimmerman,
Yes.
Page.